Hello everyone, welcome to Nightmare Chronicles. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales. Now get comfortable and relax. For the best experience, grab your headset.
When my wife passed away, I didn't know how to cope. Our house, once full of laughter and warmth, now felt like a tomb. I couldn't bear the memories, so I moved. I sold everything, packed up a few essentials, and rented a small old house in the countryside, far from the city and far from the life I used to know. The house was quaint, nestled among the trees, with a picturesque view of a nearby lake. It was quiet, secluded, just what I needed. The rent was cheap too, which made me wonder why no one else had snatched it up. The landlord didn't say much, just handed over the keys with a curt, "Be careful up there." I didn't ask what he meant. At the time, I was too numb to care. I just wanted to be alone. For the first few days, everything was normal, peaceful even. The isolation was a balm to my grief, the silence comforting. But the nights were different. On the third night, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps above me. They were slow, deliberate, as if someone were pacing back and forth in the attic. I sat up in bed, listening intently, trying to make sense of it. The house was old, and I figured the noises were just the wood settling, or maybe a raccoon or bird had gotten inside. But the footsteps continued, each one measured, rhythmic. They didn't sound like an animal. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way toward the attic door, a narrow wooden ladder leading up to it. The air grew colder as I approached, and a strange unease settled in my gut. I hadn't been up there since I moved in. The landlord had mentioned the attic briefly when I signed the lease, but I didn't think much of it. The door to the attic creaked as I opened it, revealing a dark, musty space. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight, and the air smelled of mildew and something else, something rotten. I shone the light around, but the attic was empty. Just old boxes and forgotten furniture. But the footsteps had stopped. I convinced myself it was nothing, just my imagination, or maybe some animal had scurried off when I opened the door. I went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easy that night. The next few nights, the footsteps returned, always at the same time, just after midnight, always slow and deliberate, like someone was pacing the attic above me. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, but the sound was too clear, too real, and the more I listened, the more I realized the footsteps seemed to follow a pattern, as if someone were pacing in a circle, over and over. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and headed back to the attic, determined to find the source of the noise. As I climbed the ladder, a chill ran down my spine, and the air felt thick, oppressive. I opened the attic door, shining my light around the room. That's when I saw it. A shadow, tall, dark, and unmistakably human, standing in the far corner of the attic. My heart leapt into my throat and I froze, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles turned white. The shadow didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot, and then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow vanished, dissolving into the darkness. The attic was empty again, but the feeling of being watched remained. I stumbled down the ladder, my pulse racing, and slammed the attic door shut. I tried to convince myself that I hadn't seen anything, that it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. There was something in that attic, something that didn't belong. The next day, I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, the grief, the isolation. It was all getting to me. But when night fell, the footsteps returned, louder this time, more insistent. I didn't go to the attic that night. I couldn't. A week passed, and the footsteps became a nightly occurrence, as if the figure in the attic had grown bolder. But it wasn't just the footsteps anymore. Sometimes I'd hear faint whispers too, like someone murmuring just out of earshot. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, angry, accusing.
And then, one night, the shadow came down. I was lying in bed when I heard the creak of the attic door, followed by the slow, heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced, and I lay perfectly still, straining to hear. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside my bedroom door. I didn't dare move.
For what felt like an eternity, I lay there, listening, waiting. But nothing happened. No creak of the door, no sound of footsteps retreating, just silence. I finally gathered the courage to sit up, grabbing the flashlight from my nightstand. As I shone the light toward the door, my blood ran cold. There, in the doorway, was the shadow. Tall, dark and featureless, it stood motionless, as if waiting for me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I was paralyzed with fear. And then it moved. Slowly, it stepped into the room, gliding across the floor without making a sound. It stopped at the foot of my bed, looming over me, its presence suffocating. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I could only stare in horror as the shadow reached out a hand, dark, cold, and impossibly real. I don't remember what happened next. I must have blacked out because when I woke up, the shadow was gone, and the house was silent again. But I knew I couldn't stay. The next morning, I packed my things and left the house. I didn't care about the rent or the lease. I couldn't live in that place any longer. Whatever was in the attic wasn't human, and it wasn't going to leave me alone. I tried to ask the landlord about it when I returned the keys, but he just shook his head. "You're not the first to leave," he said quietly. "There's a reason that house stays empty." I didn't need any more explanations. I left that house behind and never looked back.